7, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Are we live? That's a Wolfeboro ZBA June 27th, 2022 meeting. We're continuing several public hearings from last meeting. So I guess roll call. Is Luke Freudenberg sitting tonight?
I haven't heard.
Okay. We have Kate McMullen, alternate, who's sitting on the cases until we're finished hearing them. Nancy Stroman or Sabette Stroman. Sarah Silk. Suzanne Ryan, vice chair. Tim Cronin, clerk. Chuck Sumner, alternate. And Audrey Klein, chairperson. So at first, I'd like to do some more administrative things, Randy, because the letter that you turned in dated June 22nd has some questions that I would like to figure out before we move forward. It looks as if you're stating that you're going to withdraw the number 5. Is that true? Or you're suggesting that you would withdraw number 5?
No, not necessarily. We're on the density variance now, which we presume will finish that, and that'll either get voted up or down. Assuming from our perspective that you look favorably upon that and pass it, then I'm not sure that we need to go forward with the others. But it would probably want a little bit of discussion. I don't believe that they were necessary in the first instance, but because code enforcement denied, we filed them. And I tried in that letter to articulate the reasons, and actually it was Tim's question, I think, at the very end of the last hearing that gave me some pause as to what the board might be thinking on the other 3. So I don't think that we need to go forward on them as long as the zoning board agrees with my assessment that we don't need to go forward on them. If the board thinks we need to, we absolutely will.
So I don't want to throw them all in the same bucket because I think they're different. I'm just talking about the merger here, which is in your first paragraph. Do you want us to leave that at the end and potentially hear it, or are you withdrawing that?
So again, neither, but I'll leave it at the end.
Okay.
But if I could just make one comment, at the very first hearing, this is now hearing 3, but at the first hearing, I think the board and the applicant agreed that you could have more than one multifamily building on a lot. We had filed a variance saying that we wanted to do that because it had been denied, but
we dismissed that case.
But we,
yep.
I think, determined that that one was not necessary. I believe the others will fall into that category, but if the board agrees, great. If it doesn't, then we can discuss it.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to keep the merging one separate because I think that is separate. I think that if you want us to hear it, we'll hear it. But the other 2, I think we can discuss whether or not we want to hear them.
Sure.
What was your comment, Suzanne?
You prefaced your statements on the approval. What if it's not approved? Do you expect we still hear the other cases?
We actually haven't, as a group, discussed that, but I'm sure we could give you a quick answer at the end of that. We just hadn't thought of that option.
So let me ask the board.
The one that Randy was just
I can't hear you.
The one that Randy.
There you go.
The one that Randy was just talking about, single family, is that case 07V22, Randy?
Say that again?
Multifamilies. The one he was talking about was multifamilies.
The one in question is 5, letter A on the agenda.
Letter A is 05, which is a building permit on lot with no frontage.
Correct.
That's not the one I'm talking about.
That's the one Audrey's talking about.
Fine. I was talking about something that Randy was talking about, and I was trying to clarify which one he was talking about before we went further on.
Could you pull that even closer to you? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
So Sarah, I was just using by way of example, at the very first hearing, I think that it was decided that we did not need to go forward with the variance that asked for having two multifamily buildings on a single site because the ordinance actually permitted it, and therefore we didn't need to. By way of example, I think 3 others fall into that type of category.
Okay, now I understand what you're saying. You weren't addressing any one of the 4 that we have before us tonight. You were talking about one that we had already looked at earlier. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yeah, just by way of example, and that's how I'm hopeful that 3 of the 4 will go tonight.
Okay, thanks for your clarification, Randy.
So that being the case, Randy, do you think that we should, as a board, discuss number 7 and number 8 prior to hearing the density variance?
No, I think we have a continuation of the density variance. I think we should take that all the way to the end, vote it up or down, and then after that, we can discuss the other 3.
Okay, so essentially, to get to this point, we opened all the public hearings on these so that we could continue them all.
Okay?
It might be that we talk about those other 2 while we're talking about the density variance. Of course, we will always vote on them separately, but they might be integral to the conversation.
We're
Okay.
flexible.
Does the board have any questions or understand what we just kind of went through? I have no idea whether the AC can be turned off,
Hear
the
better?
ventilation.
I'll start.
The echo is
Thermostat's right
better.
there.
Okay, so, slow down. Do you have a question for me or for the microphone?
I have a question for you. So can you tell me what the order is going to be now?
So we were somewhat in the middle of discussing the density, which is case number 11. However, if we would like to also discuss the other 2 variances as part of our discussion about the density, we can go ahead and do that as long as we vote on them all separately.
Right? So we left off with density, and is that the one we're going to resume first?
Presumably, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Randy, was it your intention to read into the record the June 22nd letter?
No, but I did plan on speaking to it, following it for 2 reasons. There's people that aren't here that may be listening and wouldn't have access to that letter. I see we have one neighbor or a butter that's here as well that would probably not be privy to it, so I was going to run through it at some point this evening. We do have a
Okay.
couple other people that wanted to say things as well on the density, and they were going to probably start. It was our hope.
I guess there's a lot of information in here that is not necessarily what I would like to delve into. So I'm not sure that I want to spend a lot of time on a lot of this that I don't think is actually relevant.
I'm happy to keep my discussion related to the density issue on which is the application I believe you have before you right at the moment.
Can you move that closer to you?
Well, the problem maybe with that is that the applicant has expounded greatly on a lot of different things that may not be relevant, but I think the board members, besides individually needed to sort it out, the board needs to sort out what is relevant and what is not relevant in Mr. Walker's comments.
No doubt. And I think it would be more efficient to sort that out before we have him talk more about it.
That's fine by me.
Which is not to say that you can't say anything you want when it's time for you to speak. So I'd like to make a couple of points, if I may, and anybody else after that can make a few points to what we're trying to get to here, because it tends to sound very confusing when it's put before us. But looking at the letter of June 22nd, starting at the top of the second page, and going almost entirely through to the bottom of the fourth page, there's a lot of discussion about and this also includes the surveying and engineering paper, a lot of discussion about how the conservation subdivision, and I'm going to quote here, is unfortunately painful, torturous, and inconsistent with itself and has not been utilized often, placing us in virgin territory, and is not consistent with reality in any event is inconsistent with these other sections. For all of the above reasons, a variance is warranted. So I guess my question is, as far as I know, the board has to take the ordinance the way it was written, even if it's written poorly, even if it's contradictory, even if we think it's stupid. Those are not reasons, or they're not in the 5 criteria of why we can judge a case. So a lot of this discussion about the conservation subdivision manner of determining the density, if that's the argument, which is it's inconsistent, doesn't have reality, is painful and torturous, where does that fit into the 5 criteria?
Well, number one, this board always has discretion and whether it grants things. You grant a project, it goes forward. If you don't, it gets denied. So you always have the ability to interpret the ordinance. And you have that flexibility. And one of the things that I don't think can ever do is read it literally every single time, because in a lot of situations, a literal reading is not appropriate. And you grant variances, that's the purpose of a variance, to vary what it says. And one of the points that I was trying to make in the letter is that the strict, rigid formula is really not strict and rigid. It's inconsistent with itself, and therefore you do have to interpret that. And you interpret it any way you want, of course. That's the purpose of the board. But I think that the point was that there's a variety of ways of looking at it, and of course we would like you to look at it one way, and look at it that way, that'd be great. If you don't, then that would be problematic. But I don't think you can just summarily discard inconsistencies in the ordinance. And that's the point, that it is tortuous because the conservation subdivision definition in and of itself isn't compatible with the net density definition. And you have to reconcile that as a board. And that goes directly to the density issue.
So my understanding is you're asking for a variance to the density part of the conservation subdivision.
We're asking to have 90 manufactured housing units put on a 45-acre site, or
Right.
according to Chris, 49-acre site.
Which is a variance to the mathematical calculation of the density from the conservation subdivision.
It is a variance of that.
Right.
The question is how do you interpret that? It isn't rigid as you're seeming to suggest that it is.
So it seems to me that if you're asking for a variance to the mathematical computation of that numbered section, which I don't have the number for that, you're meeting all the other requirements of the conservation subdivision, but you would like a variance from the mathematical way that they figure out density. And so in order to get that variance, then it seems to me you would just simply need to show us why that parcel is unique enough to not need to apply that to the parcel, instead of trying to go through 100 various ways of figuring out how many pieces can fit in it. You're either, asking for a variance and getting away from it because it's a unique parcel, or I don't know what the other thing is that you're doing.
Audrey?
Yes.
I believe the number you're searching for is 175, 152, B1, A, B, C, and D, permitted density. And it gives the following steps. It gives how to calculate the net development, determine the maximum density.
That's the correct section, and I don't know what the application specifically called out for. Was there a section or sections? Because certainly you're not asking for a variance from the other requirements of the conservation subdivision. You're keeping your development no more than half. You're meeting the other ones. It's just that one section. Is that not correct?
Yeah, basically that is correct. If a pure reading of it, interpreted, again, Chris provided the number, I think it was 25. If you go through the analysis, he came up with 25 units. We're asking for 90. We definitely are asking for a variance from, that number, and we believe that the 90 is a reasonable number for this particular site, given the special conditions that it has.
Right. So what I'd like to know is, I'd like to hear what those special conditions are. And if you would like to talk about that, how all those calculations play a part, then that's fine. But to me, if you're asking for a variance from those calculations, I personally don't need to go down that road. Microphone, please.
I prefer not to get into his response or our input into special exception and all that. That's one of the 5 criteria. So I think to continue on the road you were on, asking questions about the various items in the letter is appropriate, but to go further than that at this time is not appropriate. You were talking about the letter, the inconsistencies in the letter, but I don't think until we actually go criteria 1 through 5 with his presentation to us on it, I don't think we should go down that road that you're going, asking those questions individually of those things at this time.
I didn't really intend to do that. I'm just saying that that's the direction that I would like to see the conversation go, because...
And then end it there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you did say, have you got more on his letter?
No, that's my main point, is that, when I'm looking at a variance to the density on that, I'm looking to approve or deny a variance to that section of calculations.
Yeah, and at the very first hearing, I think we stood up here and I acknowledged we're not compliant. Right in our variance application. We're not compliant. That's why we need a variance. That was 2 hearings back.
And I remember I asked for what was the number that it would hold. And I don't know if that's why we went down this calculation road, but I was interested in that answer at that time.
And I thought the board was asking for more clarification on the number.
Right.
So that's why the second hearing was sort of there, where we went through, what is the number? How did you come up with it? And I think Chris said that there's 12 different numbers you could come up with depending on how you looked at it. 190 units being the max and 25 being the least, depending on the way that it was interpreted. But we agree that on a pure reading, we're not compliant, and that's the reason for the variance.
I suggest we open this case and...
Okay, let's do that. Well, it is open. It's just continued, but...
I had more discussion on the letter.
Okay, can you pull that closer to you? So we're open because we're continued.
Okay.
We already read the case last time?
Good.
Right? Okay.
Regarding the letter, just so, these are small items, but they bother me. In your letter of 6/22, you say there was no objection, virtually no objection from anyone. That's incorrect. There was objection from a couple of people in the public, and there was an objection from, I don't know who DB Rivervale is, but there was an objection from them. there was concerns, and I'm not saying they were objections, but there were concerns stated clearly from the Conservation Commission regarding stormwater management and wetlands. There was caution from David Ford regarding water and sewer. There was TRC, Bernard wrote her comments as to concerns of the entrance opposite Beach Pond. She stated we'll need alteration of terrain permit and second exit for fire. Now, some of these may have been addressed, but what I'm saying, your letter is not exactly correct, and the board needs to know that. The last item is the planning board. You state and I was at that meeting, and I didn't say anything while you've twice stated this, but you stated there were no concerns from the planning board, or there was no objection from the planning board, or the planning board received it well. Well, it was an overview presentation, a consultation, not binding on either party, and Kathy Bernard, chairman, said she had concerns about wetlands. Von Dugan said she had concerns about slopes, and Kathy Bernard made it clear that she would hope that you would bring the application back to them before you continued on with your site review, your formal presentation. And then the other one that bothered me is in your presentation and your application, as you did in this letter and continue to do, you referenced Birch Hill as a prime example. And again, I know some of the members know this, but Birch Hill is a different animal altogether, as is the white place up on the hill. I can't think of the name of it.
Sugar Hill.
Taylor Hill now owns two places, and there is no comparison, none whatsoever. Both are totally different. And as an example, I have here from Birch Hills Condominium Association, a multi-page document that's very enlightening as to what I would hope some of the things are you would be doing with this application. It's very extensive: outdoor grills, outdoor burning, seasonal decoration, vehicles and parking, pets and pet violations, chimney inspection, stacking of firewood, fire sprinklers, snow removal,
But Suzanne,
and on and on. No, but I'm saying the applicant has made an example of that as comparison to what they're proposing. It's not the same animal, it's not even close. So I just would like the board to know that, and I know for myself, I've dispelled it completely in the mix of equation.
If I could just respond,
certainly.
I like Suzanne's initial remark that these are little objections, the word little being the operative one, but it is, it's unusual for an applicant to have gone before the TRC before they come here. We did that. It's unusual for the applicant to go before the planning board on a conceptual hearing, which is all it was conceptual, before they come here. And we did those things trying to lay the groundwork before we got to this board. And for the comparisons, I think that, as I remember, using the analogy to Sugar Hill and Birch Hill Estates, which are both wonderful developments and projects in Wolfeboro, which are here because of this board, I suspect. And the comparison was that we don't really know that they're in town. And I believe this project will be like that because it's set back. You can see from the plans that it's in the backland. It's remote but accessible. Birch Hill is the same thing. You know, Sarah, Suzanne, and I, we drive by that every day. You don't really know Birch Hill's there. That's the analogy that I was trying to draw, and same with Sugar Hill. You drive by that, you don't even know it's there. That's one of the beauties of it, and we believe this project will be like that. That's the analogy that I'm trying to draw, that they are wonderful additions, again, because this board approved them.
Thank you. Comments from other board members? Tim, do you have anything to bring up?
I
Yeah, closer.
appreciate Suzanne bringing up all the different rules and regulations at Birch Hill. But those are things that are put together once the place is built. I don't see these applicants doing that right now, coming up with a complete contract list when they're looking for one variance for the 90 units. I don't think that contract has any bearing on what they're asking for at all.
I tend to agree with you, except for those items can be covered at the planning board under the conservation subdivision.
Sure.
Which is part of what they are, they're not asking for a variance for the entire conservation subdivision, which I suppose they could do. They're asking for a variance from one section of it. They're willing to meet all these other ones, including a pretty significant list of items that the planning board can put in place, and I hope does put in place, should they get that far.
I agree.
I understand that totally, but I take exception to the way it was presented to us, and I just wanted that to be understood.
So noted. Thank you.
So there's two people that we'd like to have speak before I start.
Any other comments before? Sorry, I wanted to give everybody a chance since I did
think-
all the talking.
If that addresses the procedural issues, then we can get back to the substance of the hearing. And I think Michelle wanted to say something, and then Bonnie, and then I'd come up unless other abutters want to speak.
My name is Michelle Hansen. I am one of the developers. This will be short and slow, I promise, Sarah. Last month, we had these same pictures showing, and Tim, you had asked what the lot sizes were, and Sabette, you had said that they were obviously larger. So I pulled every lot that I could, for sure, tell which house number they were, and pulled the tax maps, so you have all of those lot sizes there. Most are 60-foot lot frontage. But as you'll see in the total plan in the last page, all of these lots have people behind them or roads behind them. All of our lots will have simply trees, so they'll be much less crowded. And secondly, Sabette, you had asked about resident-owned communities, and if residents do vote to become one when the park is sold, if it can actually happen. I reached out to Tara Reardon, who is the vice president of Rock, New Hampshire. She's also a state rep, and she was very excited. After my introductory email to her, she responded, "Hi, Michelle. This is very exciting. I am happy to hear that Wolfeboro is forward-thinking about affordable home ownership." She forward-thinking about affordable home ownership. So she was very excited about this project. And in further conversations with her, she was hoping that this would go forward and Wolfeboro would be a good example for other towns. In the last half of 2021, 14 parks were sold. 5 of those, the residents voted to purchase it, and they were able to facilitate all 5. Financing is not an option, not an issue, excuse me. So I hope that helped answer those questions.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I've come to understand that that really doesn't have bearing on the decision, but I appreciate you doing the research and coming back with that. So it makes me feel a little bit better that way down the road, you know, it should be okay.
I have a
Great.
question about that.
Sure.
I don't know if you got into detail with her, but my understanding is, and it could be wrong because I just got an email response, those communities that they choose, that they are able to help the residents purchase, they will only fund and help them if that community is on one parcel and not separate parcels.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. I thought you might know that.
No, because ours is on one parcel.
Yours isn't anything yet, but I get it.
It will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jordy Hutchinson, and I'm one of the developers. And I would just like to speak for a moment to Birch Hill Estates. The comparison that we made to Birch Hill Estates, I do still think is reasonably accurate. Birch Hill Estates has a whole section that they were approved for that's never been built out, so they could add additional lots. And additionally, all parks in the state of New Hampshire are governed by the Department of Justice, and they have to have a prospectus with all park rules, similar to what Birch Hill Estates has. All parks in New Hampshire have something similar, and ours will not be an exception. And we would like to introduce someone else to speak on our behalf, Bonnie Dale.
Hi.
Please pull that right down to where you need
Let's
it.
see, I'm too short to speak, I guess. Well,
You're welcome to hold it if that
Okay,
works. Yeah.
it's all right. Anyway, my name is Bonnie Dale.
I'm sorry, your name is what?
Bonnie Dale, D-A-L-E, okay? I have a few things that I love in my life, okay? One is I love this town. I've been coming here, we've lived in California most of my life, but I've been coming here 25 years, and it is a part of me that is the best time of the year for me. I care deeply about what happens here. The second thing I love is the manufactured home communities that we own in South Florida. My husband bought these communities and he began the development of this over 40 years ago, of these two communities. He and I have been married over 30 years, and I've been managing these myself basically for over 15 years. Let me tell you why I love these places. And let me mention one other thing first. So here's how I know Jordy Hutchinson. I've known him since he's a little boy. And over the years, he and I have had quite a few conversations about our communities, about what we do. And I get very happy when I see his eyes light up at the same thing that makes things that make my eyes light up in these communities. And the first thing I will say is, well, I'll tell you two stories, whether you want to hear them or not. One is that, in general, when people have objections to these places, be it in density and ownership and all these things, I think what underlies a lot of this is they don't really they're not comfortable with what people have thought of as trailer parks or mobile home parks. And all I can say, I think we're going to show oh, my video's going, so I don't know if you can see that. But what I will say to you is this, and you want to just let the video play for a second? Oh, it's repeating. Okay, is this. And this will sound perhaps very spoiled, but when my husband and I first got married, I said, "You own mobile home parks? I guess I'll go with you, but I won't stay there," because he had always had a house there. And I went there for the first time, and even then, over 30 years ago, I said, I cannot believe it's this nice. These look like houses to me, regular houses. And since then, they've gotten better and better and better. And now, anybody who walks in to the models, it's a wow. It's just a wow. You can't believe it, and you can't believe that they can be done at this price. And so that's story one I wanted to tell you. Story two is that is this. A number of years ago, and this happens in different ways at different times, but a number of years ago, we had sold a house to a police officer, and she came into my office and she said, "I just want to tell you, I want to thank you so much, because I never thought that I could afford to live in a house that I was so proud to invite people to." And that brought tears to my eyes. And because that is what makes me the happiest doing this. In addition to the scholarship program we're able to offer the residents, and the tutoring program, and those things. And when I told Jordy about this, I could see his eyes light up. And I thought, all right, he's thinking the right way about this. So that's partly, and I know how good this housing is for the kind of people this community needs, and all communities, quite frankly, need. I know it's for the firemen and the policemen and the people you want to be able to live in your community who now can't afford it, basically. And So that's why I wanted to talk to you a little bit today, and I invite you to ask me any questions about my communities. What I will say is, yeah, I'm going to do it. Yep. Okay. So what I have 2 large communities in South Florida. One has 774 units on 147 acres, so about 5.8 per is the density, which is way more dense than you're talking about. And my other community is slightly under 8 per acre. And our lot sizes are, in general, 50 by 90. Nobody ever feels that, oh, this is so crowded. They're so happy to come and not have to take care of a big yard. And it is the most peaceful place to walk around. I go for walks myself every day, and it's peaceful and it's quiet, and it's great because we have all rules about, you know, you have to turn the music off if you have music on, and it's just very peaceful and quiet, and it's way more dense than anything you're talking about. And the other feature of a community like this that I really love is it's super safe. And if you could actually go online and you could look up my communities and you can see the crime statistics, and we are the safest place. By the way, this is in the Fort Lauderdale area, these 2 that I'm talking about. And they are super safe. They are either the safest or comparable to the safest communities, to the safest, I don't mean manufactured home communities, any community near us. The biggest reason for that is because we look at the applications for credit and criminal and background, and we let in safe people. And people who are going to follow the rules, in addition to paying their bills, but they're mostly going to be following the rules. And that's why, I mean, I just think these are great places. And I look back and I think, you know, how you know, I was so negative about the idea of these, but I've grown to absolutely love them as a place for people to live who we care about in our community. And I think the mayor of our town, if you wanted to call the mayor of Davie, and the town administrator would tell you how happy they are to have Rexmere Village and Paradise Village in the town, and they've been increasingly great over the years. And I mean, I would as much of these has gone up in value over the years, I hope my child will want to run them, because I feel like we do such good things. So that's all I wanted to say, and I want Randy and I think Michelle and Jordy. To me, every time I've had a conversation with Michelle and Jordy, I hope they get to do this, because I feel like they're going to do this town proud, and that matters to me. That matters to me as much as the communities. And I have absolutely no financial interest in this. From the beginning, I said I'm not going to have any financial interest in this.
Thank you.
All right.
So just to follow up on what Bonnie said, she obviously owns 2 big parks. One had over 700 units in it with density of 6 to 1, 6 units per acre. We're asking 2 per acre, and they're wonderful. No issues, no problems. The property can sustain it, and it all is something that we believe Wolfeboro can sustain easily with just 2 units per acre instead of 6 or 8 to 1, which work in other communities without issue whatsoever. So if I could just go to my letter initially, and then I want to talk about a couple of cases. So I'll get right to the density portion of my letter, and it started off, I think, on the second page in, which says that Surveyor Berry concluded that strict analysis was 25 manufactured housing sites, but noted that there were other possible options, depending how you looked at it, to go all the way up to potentially 190. And if you start at 175, 152B in the conservation subdivision under permitted density, it says that you're supposed to back out the roads as a step one. We all know that when you get to the net development density calculation in another section of the ordinance, they don't jive with each other. And the reason I think it's important to look at the inconsistency is because this board, I think, can approve this easily by saying, that was already approved. That if you do the analysis a different way, there really isn't a need for a variance perhaps in the first instance, depending on how you look at it, which is the reason I went through it. If, however, you're going to adhere to the 25 units is all that's permitted, then we definitely need a variance. But under other ways to look at it, we may not need the variance at all. So it starts off by saying it's supposed to back out the roads. Then when you go to net development density, after doing some calculations, it says then back out another 20% for roads, which is a theoretical number. And I don't think that formula works well for large pieces of property like ours. Smaller piece, 5, 10 acres, 15, 20 maybe. But to go to the other extreme, let's say you have a 1,000-acre piece of property. You have to back out 200 acres for roads. That just doesn't make sense because you're not going to have 20. So the ordinance itself does not make sense. You can't reconcile those two. Wolfeboro needs to change it. It hasn't, which is one of the reasons we're asking for a variance to get us through this calculation. The second thing that I suggested was that what's the minimum lot size? You divide that number by. When Chris did the calculation, he divided it by 1 acre because we're in the residential zone. The residential zone says you're supposed to divide it by 1 acre, although it also says for each additional unit, you only need a ½ acre. And if you use the ½ acre as the number, that would double the density from 25 to 50. And if you believe that we comply with the village residential criteria, that would double it again to 100. And we believe that we do comply with that. But importantly, the conservation subdivision regulation says that this board can be flexible. The planning board can be flexible. And it also defines what a minimum lot area is as the denominator. It sends you to the R zone, which says 1 acre, but then it defines what that is, and in the definition it says that you can be flexible. So I believe the board has discretion in the denominator to substitute another number. The end goal is, what can this property sustain? Can we have 90 units and have water, sewer, infrastructure, roads, still have 50% open space? We meet all those boxes. So practically, the purpose of the ordinance, the density, is not to have too much congestion. We don't believe we have. We've put it in one area, not as dense as Bonnie Dale suggested some of her developments are, even though they work well with more density. So the point is that this board has flexibility in using that denominator, and if you do, I think you can easily get to 90 if you want to go down that road. Again, I won't repeat it again because it's in my letter. Number two is that if we would do a multifamily development on this property, we could have 90 units. The multifamily ordinance says that you can have 2 per acre, which this board just approved on the property right next door. We have 90 units on a 45-acre piece of property. This is also 45 acres. We're asking for the same 90, the exact same density. So if we were to do a multifamily, which would be our fallback, we could have 90 units. And it's therefore nonsensical to prohibit it in one sense and when it's permitted on another. And I just don't see how those are reconcilable, and that therefore no fair and substantial relationship exists between what the purpose of the ordinance is from a density perspective when you look at both. Secondly, if we do multifamily, you don't even have to do a net density calculation. It's not required at all. That's why we didn't do it on the multifamily project. We didn't go through any of these calculations because the ordinance doesn't require it.
You weren't required to do a conservation subdivision on that property. It's in a different zone.
Correct. But if my point is, if we did do multifamily, we could have 90 for the same reason we had 90 there. So we can get to the 90. The only question is can we do it with manufactured housing units or not? You've permitted it for multifamily. I don't see how logically you can deny it for manufactured housing when it's the exact same density on the exact same amount of acreage. Let me just go through 3 cases that I was reading over the weekend on this. And one of them is the Nasser case versus the town of Deering. And that case basically stood for the proposition that a developer had 76 acres, 50 acres were under a conservation easement, and they wanted to do a development. And the question is could they include the 50 acres in the conservation easement even though it wasn't buildable in the calculation? And the zoning board said yes. The court said, actually the zoning board didn't opine on that, but the court said that you absolutely could when it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the reason for it is it says that it's permissible for the zoning board to take into consideration this conservation area even though it is not buildable. Again, we have a 46-acre tract, and we're not going to build on all of it. We're going to have 50% of it be set aside for open space. It's still something to legitimately take into consideration, even though you couldn't use it in the calculation initially. But the board said, well, you can use that in the calculation, even though you can't build on it. So the courts have been rather liberal in how they interpret these density requirements and allowing you to use land that you can't build on to get there. The second case is the Rancourt case, which is a City of Manchester case. And it's a homeowner that wanted to put 2 horses on their property in the residential zone. And the residential zone absolutely and unequivocally said, you can't have livestock in a residential lot. These people said, yes, but we have a big lot. We have a large lot. We have 3 acres, which in Manchester is apparently large. And the zoning board said, if you have 3 acres because you're that special condition, and again, we have a special condition here, our large lot, but that special condition was sufficient to allow them to do a use that wasn't permitted at all. We have a use that is permitted. It's residential. We're not trying to put horses here or livestock. We have a permitted use of residential, but in that particular case, because they had a 3-acre lot and it was thickly wooded, we have both of those categories met. They allowed a variance to occur so that these people could put 2 horses on. Again, the special condition being that they had an unusually large lot in that area. We've indicated in our application and at all our prior hearings that our 46-acre lot is one of the biggest in the area. I think it is the largest we represented within a 1-mile radius that had municipal water on it. And if that's not accurate, it's got to be one of the largest. But again, similar to the 3-acre argument that was accepted.
Randy, can I just, how come it says green space 68 acres? What is that? So you're saying this whole thing is 48 acres?
So that is probably both phases of the project.
Okay, thank you.
And we're really just discussing the second 45. I gave some plans that showed, the multifamily was the 45. We've already gone through that. We're now on lots 15 and 16, the last numbers of the tax map. One has 24 acres, one has 21, which gave us the 45, which is what we're proposing for the manufactured housing unit, although Chris has concluded that that's actually low, that we actually have 49 acres. But 45 is perfectly fine for our argument. That's what we did represent, but as you've asked us to do more work and we've done more work, we've actually gained a little extra acreage. So the last case is probably the most important, the Harrington case versus Town of Warner. It's a 2005 case. And that dealt with a 46-acre, exactly what we have, manufactured housing park, exactly what we're asking. And in that case, the fact pattern was this. The town of Warner had a requirement that you could not have a manufactured housing park without a minimum of 10 acres. My supposition, and this is just my supposition, that the reason they required a minimum of 10 acres is because it wasn't feasible probably to do it on a 2, 3, 4 acre part, so they wanted at least 10 acres. And they also had a cap of 25 manufactured housing units per that 10 acres, which was a density, by the way, of 2.5. We're only looking for 2, so that was more than what we have. And that park owner, to start with, had 25 manufactured housing sites, the exact limit, plus another 54 campsites for a total of 87 sites on this 46-acre piece. And he wanted 26 more. And even if the property was vacant, the 26 more that he wanted is greater than, you know, the conditions. So he was trying to go from 87 to 113, which, by the way, the zoning board granted, which, by the way, the Supreme Court approved, even though it's way over the density. And we're asking for the same thing in essence. They had 46 acres, we have 46 acres. They had 87 units to start with. We are looking for 90. They wanted 26 more. We're looking for 90. We're not trying to get 113 like they did in that case. We're only trying to get 90 units. And again, the court concluded, the zoning board concluded that that was okay for them to do that because of special conditions that that property had, one of which was that it was difficult for it to subdivide. So let me get to one of the questions you asked earlier. What are the special conditions of this property? Now, we already addressed all of this at the first hearing, but I'll hit it again. Number one, that we're abutting a 45-acre piece of property on which you've approved 90 units. But the 45 acres is unique in this area. There are not many properties that big in Wolfeboro. Most people are lucky if they have 1 acre, maybe 2. Most people won't have more than that. We have 45 acres. That's an unusually large piece of property. And that in and of itself is a special condition, which, by the way, is what I believe you found for the special condition on the last application you approved for the multifamily. Same thing. We had a 45-acre piece of property there, one of the largest in the area, and this board said that meets the special condition. Same exact test here. And I don't think I need to go through any other special conditions because I think that's in and of itself sufficient based on what this board has already ruled in the last case. But I'll go on to suggest that we are uniquely remote because we're behind other properties. Even though we have frontage, the project is to go back off of it. We're surrounded also by a lot of commercial properties. We gave you picture after picture after picture of GI Plastique, Eastern Propane, the town stump dump, the SAU, Hancock Lumber. You know, we have a lot of commercial properties which make this unique around us. We have some residential as well. We also have Sugar Hill at one end of the road and Harriman Hill at the other. And this project will be similar, again, set off the road, not be able to see it, but will fit nicely within the area, but they're not directly surrounded by that magnitude of buildings making us unique. I don't believe there's anybody else that falls into that category. And due to those special conditions, we believe that literal enforcement of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship. Now, we know that any ordinance creates a hardship on people. Takes away property rights. And the courts over the years are becoming more and more liberal in watering down the unnecessary hardship test to give back people more of those rights. So the purpose of the density requirement is to have adequate land. We have 46 acres, again, an unusually big piece of property. This is not a 4-acre piece that we're trying to have 70 units on like you had an application earlier this year. We have adequate land, we have adequate buffers. We're we're virtually innocuous, you know, from the road driving by it.
Randy?
So, yeah.
I have a question. I know you covered this in your letters or all in the information. Could you bullet point again, because this is in a conservation district, all of the things you've proposed that kind of honor because of the wetlands or everything that's keeping what am I trying to say? Just kind of honoring the fact that you're in a conservation district. Like I know you put the houses close together
Yeah,
so
sure.
that you're keeping as much property
So-
open.
Sure. So Wolfeboro, I think, for a while has been trying to get away from conventional subdivisions. You don't see them as much except on smaller properties. They're not financially feasible, given road costs in particular. And my read of the conservation subdivision is that they are, number one, and it says it right in there, they want you to be flexible, innovative, et cetera. We believe we've done all those things. They encourage specifically shorter roads to cluster the homes in one area. We've done that. Number two, they want shorter utility runs. We've done that. They encourage you to have less paving, and I'll add in less pollutive paving, because asphalt is basically a pollutant. Less roads, the less asphalt. The less cost as a result of all of that, you can pass those savings on to ultimate buyers. They also encourage you to have 50% of open space. We do. Again, because we've clustered those in one area and had lots, again, bigger than Bonnie suggested were reasonable. Her parks, they have greater density. We're out there. It's still there. So those types of things we have done to be totally compliant with the purposes of that ordinance. There'll also be a 50-foot buffer around the entire perimeter. We're a thickly wooded area, as you saw, particularly if you went into the project. It's not in the ordinance itself, but visibility, and again, I keep stressing this, that when you drive by, that's one of my tests. What do you see? And again, you're not going to see much because of the buffer up front, the trees, et cetera, and the development has been back off. So the developer, I think, has done a very nice job trying to comply with all of the requirements. But the project with 25 units was just not financially feasible, which is why we're asking for the 90. Did that answer your question?
Yeah,
I gave you enough
wanted to
bullet
remember it
points.
by kind of like the total sum of all the things you were doing. Thank you.
Sure.
Rick, can I ask you a quick question? These will not have any garages?
Say again?
These units will not have any garages?
I don't believe so, but you can correct me if that's the case.
We are planning to offer garages or carports for most of the units. So yes.
So it will be a choice. They won't all have them then, essentially?
They may or may not all have them, but we are planning to have garages or carports, yes.
If the lot is 50 feet wide and you have a 26-foot wide house,
Well, the absolute narrowest lot that we show or that we're asking for is 50 feet. We will have to probably modify that at the planning board level. And we do want to have garages or carports. So, I mean, it's likely that we're going to end up with most of our lots being wider than that. The absolute minimum would be 50 by 100. And that could sustain a garage in the back of the property. The houses are only like 54 feet long, so.
if you start increasing the size of the lots like that, is that going to take away from the open space you have left?
Chris can speak to that.
Could I finish with my question? Tim interrupted.
Sure.
Can you get closer to your mic, though? Because I'm having a hard time hearing you.
The reason I was asking was because the third, or whatever phase it is, of Harriman Hill that they're working on now, they changed the entire design because the places that they were offering didn't have storage, didn't have garage space, and so they had to stop. I think that was just a quickie little duplex that they were using, and it was on a slab, so there wasn't even a basement, and I don't imagine these will have basements either. And they had to totally change their design to accommodate what people actually wanted. People turned away because there was no storage. You know, young families with a lot of kids come up with a lot of stuff, and the kids outgrow it, and then they get more stuff. And so I just wondered if there was going to need to be additional storage on these individual lots. And don't get too close to that, because all it does is echo.
Okay, I'll stand. Is this a good distance? I just wanted to speak to that real quick. We've just done preliminary design work. If we were to get green lighted at this level to fully design this, that's when we'll, address some of the concerns that you've brought up and concerns that the planning board will have, and storage is definitely one of them. So we plan to address that. So they'll either have garages, carports, maybe a detached shed. It's still variable.
We still have to meet the open space requirement, though, of 50%. So,
That's what I wanted to know.
yeah, we're not asking for a variance on that.
No.
So, one of the things that we're asking for is a variance because we believe that strict adherence to the formula, which is a one-size-fits-all, and to me it's like shoes. You know, we all have different shoe sizes, and to apply that rigid formula to everybody isn't necessarily fair when you have some properties that deserve different treatment. And to me, that formula, I think, works much better when the lots are smaller or mid-sized, but it starts to fade. The rationale of that starts to fade as the lots get bigger, and when you have a big lot like 46 acres, that formula becomes less practical and warrants a variance because it doesn't contemplate projects of this size, is my opinion. Secondly, it is a factor on cost, purchase price of the property, infrastructure costs, et cetera. You have to have a reasonable rate of return, and practically we just can't do it with 25. 90 was the magic number, which is why we asked for it. Back to your point is we've tried to be innovative and flexible with the design, and again, I believe this board under the conservation subdivision has the right to be flexible, and I put in shall be flexible, that you can not rigidly enforce those numbers when we're otherwise compliant because of the shorter roads, shorter utility runs, less pavement, open space, et cetera, because we particularly clustered those homes in one particular area. Again, the fallback for us is to go and do a 90-unit multifamily, which we get that same density, and to me it just doesn't logically fly that if you can have 90 multifamily units or 90 families, why can't you have it with this when you've just approved it on the property right next door, which is the exact same size? If anything, it's a little bit smaller. We also believe that we're compliant with the village residential requirements, and that would allow double density if you follow that, or at least is a consideration to take into your thought process. But the biggest issue, or the biggest benefit that we have, is we're the largest parcel in the area. That's the special condition that we believe warrants you relaxing the ordinance somewhat to give us those extra density when there is no fair and substantial relationship that exists, and strictly adhering to that when we can support 90 units without a problem. Chris says we can do it, contingent upon DES, of course, and we're going to have it on the lot right next door. So if I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Microphone.
Yes, you repeat that we're the largest parcel in the area. You yourself use a 1 mile radius. So I took that 1 mile radius, and you will see here in yellow, larger lots are as large lots as yours.
We did say with municipal water, and I don't think that chart is following that.
And, now you made me forget my thought.
I'm sorry.
Darn it. I got interrupted and I couldn't forget. I will say that there's 18 homes in that stretch. And
Can you tell us what stretch you're looking at?
What?
Tell us what stretch you're looking at.
Oh, 109A.
To how far?
I went up a mile and a half.
Oh, where does that leave you?
It takes me just past
Past Tufnboro and Wolfeboro.
Wambach Road. Yeah. And it's very rural. There's farm area there. In your previous presentation, you commented about lot size, and I did mention that across the street there was one larger. And I chose not to go south because that's commercial, industrial, all developed. I chose to look at the character of the land going north. And I have to contend, in my opinion, that you do not have the largest or the only large lot.
So in response to that, two things. Number one, City of Manchester case with 3 acres was a large lot, so it's relative. Number two, we indicated it was the largest lot with municipal water, and there were no other comparables that we could find close by to us.
So what did you use by close by?
And this board did already find that the lot right next door that you approved the multifamily on for the 45 acres was a large lot. You've already ruled on that, this board.
Well, what was your area that you were looking at? What is the area that you were looking at when you said you looked in the area? She's looking at a mile something.
That's what you used in your application presentation.
Could I look at your map there?
Sure.
May I ask a question? Why is this relevant?
What?
Why is it?
Because they're using it as their special conditions, Tibet.
Because it's the only large lot, you're saying? That is the
part
reason?
of the 5 criteria.
Talk into your microphone.
We also submitted a chart that you should have in your package. I think there were 18 parcels, everybody that abutted us, and I think we were number 1 on that. You go all the abutters around us.
When you look at different in our ordinance, and if you look at, like you love to look at case law, they talk about, when they talk about these conditions and so forth, they talk about the zone. I tried to be fair and just look at what you looked at, but in all reality, it's the zone.
Well, can I just address your comments, Suzanne? Because what we specifically said in our application was they were the largest lot, or that we believed it was the largest lot within a mile serviced by municipal water, and obviously excluding the town-owned parcels of land. So, and I still believe that to be the case based on this map.
So to your point, Suzanne, in my mind, if we're looking at lots that are equally burdened by this conservation subdivision section that we're looking at, then we're looking at lots that are in the residential zone that have water, because that's how that's defined. We're looking in lots that are in the manufactured overlay district, because this lot is. And we're looking at lots that are over 10 acres, because those are the ones that have to go into the conservation subdivision. So you have to parcel out those lots that meet those in order to compare those lots to the uniqueness of this lot. So that whittles down the available comparables.
It may whittle it down, but nevertheless, there are lots that are as large in that area of water and sewer. In fact, the town owns the biggest one.
Well,
which I disregarded.
The residential zone doesn't have sewer, so it just has water. Oh, that does have sewer.
You look at the lot
Has
and
water.
the integrity of the lot, not just on that. When we get going through the 5 criteria, I'll elaborate.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, Christopher Berry with Berry's Surveying and Engineering, representing the applicants here this evening. I think you hit the nail right on the head, and it was the reason I stepped up to the podium was it's easy to say that there are bigger lots in New Hampshire. It's easier to say there are bigger lots in Wolfeboro or, even the surrounding area. But when you look at the ordinance in which we're trying to utilize to develop a site, there are restrictions on what sites can be used for this purpose. And I think that Randy and the applicant have astutely pointed out that this is a special lot in this zone for all of those reasons. We have municipal water available to us. We have seclusion available to us. We have the availability to provide a nice open space subdivision that other sites may not have that land mass that we have afforded to us. We also have some really nice topographic features that will play very well with the design of the subdivision. This isn't, I know we're looking at a flat piece of paper, but we all know there's some topography and relief to the site. And as a designer that designs neighborhoods for a living, those are character pieces that we integrate into a project design like this, and that is a special feature of this parcel. We look at, I know that the zoning board is paused with this question of what is over intense use. And I think when you look at a parcel like this, the math and the numbers and the equations, all of that aside, can the applicant produce a open space subdivision which meets the purpose and intent of the zoning regulations and the subdivision regulations, creates a nice product for the town of Wolfeboro, a beautifully landscaped project where people can live and take pride, and all of the other amenities and features that the applicant is trying to produce in a neighborhood like this, and apply it to this piece of property. We've demonstrated to you that it's special in many different ways. There are areas of the parcel that shouldn't be developed. It wraps around to the rear. There's a large wetland at the rear of the site. That area shouldn't be developed. You should not have housing units out there. And that's why these are, clustered towards the center of the property, or the front center of it. As Randy points out, just based on the frontage shape in the very different areas that provide frontage along Route 109A, it does create a secluded project. Again, speaking to the use of the open space subdivision ordinance and speaking to the special condition of this piece of property. If this were a square rectangle that had a mile of frontage and didn't have some of these other characteristics to it, then it may not be that special. But in this case, there are a lot of really nice features to it. I think that we've overcome a lot of the technical aspects of it at a really early stage. Whether or not the site can load this number of units with sewage disposal, whether or not we have water available to us by the town, and a lot of the other issues that were brought up earlier in the meeting concerning stormwater management and traffic, things of that nature. We certainly don't think that we're done. When we walk out of here tonight is really when we start the project. There's a large amount of engineering work that has taken place by traffic engineers, soil scientists, wetland scientists, landscape architects, a whole gambit of different professionals that need to then get involved in designing a neighborhood that we're trying to design here. And so this is sort of the first step in allowing us to create that neighborhood for you.
Can I ask Mr. Barry a question? Sure. We have our little map here.
Yes,
that
ma'am.
you gave us. And we have one entrance up by Beach Pond Road, not quite, but almost exactly opposite it. Then we have another one that's just before you get to the entrance to Sugar Hill.
Yep.
And then there was a little third one in between that the fire department wanted as a roadway going in.
Yes, ma'am.
In case of emergencies with the Knox box and what have you. And that's, I don't remember what, it was near a little brook, I think.
Near a little brook, is that what you said?
Yeah, wasn't it kind of near that little brook? Yeah.
There's a small wetland crossing that would be required.
Yes. So when you are calculating your deduction for your roadway, are you counting that third roadway in?
So that's an interesting question, because the ordinance doesn't say that I calculate how much road we're using. It just says take 20% of the remainder. And that's one of the inequities that I tried to point out in my narrative to you.
But it's an equity you have to live with because it's in our zoning ordinance.
Understood, but the inequity is the ordinance asked me to take away 20%. It doesn't say add up the roadways. So you just asked if I added up the roadways. I did not. I know that it's far less than 20%. Is that all?
No, it was important to me because you're arguing against the 20%. So one of your alternatives argument was that you didn't have that much roadway. So I was just trying to determine how much roadway you were counting versus the 20%.
So Other points?
No, I like your original argument of just discussing why they think it's a good idea to develop this 45 acres.
Why this would have special, unique characteristics other than
Yes.
that the other lots that
I'd like to hear the special
qualify for this don't?
I think that would clarify things.
So on that note, I was going to wait, but I will now. I did look at the GIS, and I see that in the residential zone, in the manufactured overlay zone, and on parcels larger than, that appear to be larger than 10 acres, I see about 6 up North Main Street. And I see maybe 6 up Beach Pond Road. And I really don't see any out Route 28. So when I'm looking at those other lots that are large, that are apparently developable, that have the same constraints as this lot, I look at what those lots look like, and then I look at what this lot looks like, and I see a lot of things that impact this lot that I don't see with those other lots. So I can go through the list of what I see, but I do believe that this lot is unique in that sense, that it has a number of elements that these other lots that have the same constraints don't have. But I don't know if we want to, I mean, that's kind of going into deliberation of the 5 criteria. Do we have any other general questions for the applicant for what they've presented?
Could I answer Ms. Silk's question directly? So the question of 20%, the reduction of 20% is approximately 6.7 acres or so. That's what the equation requires us to subtract. The total amount of roadway in our project is 3.8 acres.
3.8?
3.8, so a little more than half.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just a quickie, and does that include that little fire road or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
It includes the surface of the roadway, which would also include the surface of the fire access road.
Thank you for that clarification.
Would you want to ask if the public wants to comment?
Yes. Is there anybody else that would like to comment in favor? I think we've heard from everybody on that side of the room. Tony, in favor? Okay.
Hi, Tony Fallon, 49 Center. I'm an architect too, Tony Fallon Architecture. I am in favor of this proposal still. I did write a letter the last time, and I'm in favor of this second half too. I think it meets the spirit of the conservation subdivision. I've got a daughter and son-in-law in Colorado, and so I'm used to seeing out there, big open space that they put some very concentrated homes on and then leave a lot of big open space for everybody to enjoy. And I think this really meets that, I used to be able to say in spades, but anyways, I think it meets it very well. So, and then like Randy said, less pollution. I think that it's pretty good. This half, the other thing that's kind of fun about it, it meets the archetypical vision of home that a lot of people have. It's a little bit more smaller setting than the other one that got approved, which is fine. The other one's a little bit more affordable still. This is affordable, a little bit higher price, looks a little bit more like home, so I think that's kind of neat. I think this is an earnest and heartfelt try to meet the needs of homes for families, which I think a lot of you all agree, is a problem with that currently. So, but I just, on the last thing, Audrey, I'm wondering about Birch Hill Estates. I'm thinking, I tried to look it up, but I'm thinking that might be about the same landmass, but a more traditional subdivision approach. You go in there and, it all looks nice. I think this is akin to that, but more with the cluster development. So I think that is a precedent that's been there for a while.
Thank you. Others would like to speak against the proposal, folks? Okay, thank you. Board, what would you like to do?
Close the public hearing portion and deliberate.
As usual, I'm a little bit uncomfortable closing the public hearing, but we can take a vote to do that.
Close the public hearing comment portion. Does that help?
Well, have those other two variances that we opened.
Well, close the public hearing on case 07V22, is it?
No, we're working on 11.
Oh, 11, okay, sorry.
Okay. Last words from the applicant? Okay. All right. All in favor of closing the public comment portion?
Do we need a second to that?
Oh, yes.
I'll second.
Thank you. Yes?
Yes.
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 Aye.
Okay. So we will go to the 5 criteria. So as often is the case, number 1 and number 2 kind of run together. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. So, Tib, do you want to start off with that one?
I think the public interest is looking for affordable housing here, and this would meet that need. So it'd be definitely in favor of the public interest.
And do you have anything about the spirit of the ordinance being observed with this variance?
Well, I believe it is observed, so
I'm sorry, what?
I believe the spirit of the ordinance is observed.
Okay.
Yep. I think the one objective of our duties is to understand the purpose of the zoning ordinance as adopted, and it's to regulate land for the purpose of health, safety, and welfare of the residents, adopted to promote orderly growth, to ensure that development is commensurate with the character and physical limitations of the land. Further, this chapter is designated to ensure that the timing of new development takes into account the immediate and long-range financial impact of the proposed use. To that, I would add, Section 175(1) was adopted that regulates just that for orderly growth, and zoning is designed to lessen traffic and on streets and avoid undue concentration of population. We're looking at 90 units, and the 90 units previously adopted or approved is 180 units times 2 people, 360 people. So, contrary to public interest and spirit of the ordinance, the 90 units conflict with the allowed density in the conservation subdivision. The basic objective of that section of the zoning ordinance is defined by its density. The 90 units alter the essential character of the rural neighborhood zone, adds and increases a concentration of population on a parcel and traffic. Somewhere I've got myself a note, see something that Laura wrote. 3, it alters the essential character of the neighborhood, which is residential and looked upon with agricultural uses, changes to natural environment, and question impact to the wetlands. 90 units on what ordinance would allow for conservation subdivision is undue concentration of population. It has a cumulative effect, if allowed, And that cumulative effect, once it's allowed, in that area can be allowed to have a similar situation, and that's how you get your creep and your accumulation. The question still remains regarding the burden of municipal services, that the growth does not increase faster than the ability of services to expand, and I'm going to include traffic. And I have from the, according to the Institute for Transportation Engineering Trips Generation Manual, trips per day at 2 and 3 bedrooms, it would be 5 trips per day per unit. They go by units, Monday through Friday, with the understanding weekends are less. So you would have 450 trips per day for the manufactured homes and 450 trips per day for the apartments, 900 trips per day, Monday through Friday, on Route 109A, which typically will travel south to Route 28, through town, and over to Route 11 or Route 16. So, let's see the next page. So therefore, within the spirit of the ordinance, the density of population is a key and factor. The traffic and transportation is a key factor. The character of the neighborhood is a key factor. Existing uses, zoning of neighborhood property is a factor. And when you ride, as I said, I did north, it's very nice there, and there's few homes, and the people will be affected by the traffic. Municipality has a legitimate interest in ensuring that the residential development is processed in an orderly and planned manner, and that the burden of the municipality's services do not increase faster than the ability of the services to expand. The town must also preserve essential environmental features. So there, that's my 1 and 2.
Okay. Because I want to talk to a lot of the points you brought up, I'd like to go next, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Just don't get too close to your microphone.
Is that too close?
Because when you get too close, it gets so echoey, I can't understand.
Okay. Well, it's a hard place to find the right space.
That's good. That's good.
Okay.
Where you are right now.
I'm trying to kind of answer some of the points that you said. You felt that there needs to be
I'm not going to debate it with you.
No, I know.
That's my
I hear ya.
researched opinion.
Yep. So orderly growth, the density that they're proposing is the same as the residential density. It's no more. So I think the growth is orderly. The neighborhood, I looked at the houses that border this property along 109A and the houses across the street up to about the rink. And I looked at their tax cards, and they're all very similar in size to what's being proposed. And they're all around between 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. They're all ranch-style houses. So I feel like it is not, is not affecting the neighborhood that's already there. I'm still talking. Traffic, it is going to increase, but this is a state road. The intersection works well as far as I can tell. I'm not a traffic engineer, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a dangerous intersection. And Tuftonboro and Ossipee, and to some extent Moultonboro, add traffic to this road because it's a state road. So I think that, saying that we can't add local people on the roads, I don't think that that is fair to our development as a town. I don't believe that there's no indication at all that wetlands are being impacted There's no very poorly drained soils on this entire property. There's poorly drained soils, but if you look at Bay Street, they're developing right next to very poorly drained soils, right on the edge of the setback because they're not in a conservation subdivision. So why put that burden on this property when Wolfeboro needs to balance the growth that it's having over the last 2 years in particular? If we look at the purpose of the conservation subdivision, it says, provide for a diversity of lot sizes, building densities, and housing choices to accommodate a variety of age and income groups and residential preferences so that the community's population diversity may be maintained. Now, we've grown a lot in the last 2 years, and they were essentially all people that have the ability to choose to live here. And that's an ability that many people don't have a choice to live here, and this is going to provide that. So it's going to balance out a growth that we have seen, and I think that balance is really important. I think that's it for now.
Can I respond?
Why don't we let other people say?
Because I'll forget what you said, and I'd like to respond to your
Well, then we
items.
get into, then I want to respond to what you said.
Fine.
Let's have Sarah say what she would like to say, and maybe we can come back and have second turns.
I've looked at it a couple of different ways, and 175, 152H1 under conservation subdivision says you have to have a minimum of 50% of the total tract area, excluding the road rights-of-way or easements required to be permanently dedicated as open space. So that's virtually 70%. And I don't think this is a penalty because I think the whole purpose of the conservation subdivision is conservation. Perhaps if it was in a different type of area, it might make a different type of difference. There's also section 175, 155D3 that says not more than 2 ingresses or egresses shall be permitted on the first 50 acres of the tract, and 1 additional egress may be permitted for each additional 25 acres, so they have 3. So I think that's something that somebody's going to need to address somewhere along the line. When it comes to contrary to the public interest, I'm always hung up on the sewer thing because I dealt with it so much when I was on the Board of Selectmen. And I did speak with the day before today. We did get a memo from him, and I did talk to him late this afternoon. And there is an ability for them to hook up to water. It's not at the lot, but they can hook up to water, and it would be expected that they would foot the bill to do that and not the town. And then there was a unique concept, and it's important that concept be highlighted because it's not been approved by DES, it's not been approved by the Board of Selectmen, it's not been approved by anyone, and it was the thought that they would have to have all of their leach fields on their property, and this would go for both the apartments and for the manufactured housing area. And the cost of putting that all in after they can get permission from DES based on the soils and the loading and all that, which everybody has referred to numerous times. You know, Randy says, it's up to DES, and that's absolutely true. After they get that figured out, then they would have to build this. And then after it's built in a working condition and matches up all the requirements of DES, which we don't know what they are at this point, and the town, which we don't know at this point either, then they would turn over the operation of that particular set of leach fields to the town to make certain that they were upkept. There will be absolutely no effluent from these lots going to the sewer treatment plant. The sewer treatment plant is not equipped to handle all of this extra amount at this time. And then I have a little concern about the reports of how many square feet they've deducted for 15% slopes and 25% slopes. 15% slope was 771,284 square feet. And then there was an additional 191,065 square feet of slopes over 25%. And that concerns me because the town's problem that we had with our latest efforts with sewage disposal was the fact that after you got above a 12% slope, you had breakouts with water because of the degree of slope. And in fact, the EPA manual says that you can't build certain types of effluent disposal on greater than a 12% slope. So I've got a lot of concerns about, contrary to public interest, because I'm concerned about the effluent down there and whether they can handle it. And the Conservation Commission had done, and I would just like to make sure it's in the record that when the Conservation Commission talked about this project, I left. So I would not have a conflict of interest. I don't see that report right here, but they had several concerns, and one of them was the fact that you make more than 10% of the area impervious, and then it has a detrimental effect on the ecosystem. And although there's no very poorly drained soil right there, and here it is. They have a certified wetland scientist. They've consulted, tells us that as soon as 10% of a property is covered with impervious surfaces, downstream ecology is negatively affected. We know that this proposal is still conceptual, but the plan indicates that 75% of the area will be left as open space, presumably leaving 25% covered by impervious surface area. This would be roads and buildings and whatnot. So I have concerns on that as well.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Just scoot up some more, closer. I'm too close.
Just pull the base closer.
Oh, okay.
It's not nailed down.
Is that okay now? All right. As far as the public interest goes, I think manufactured housing is in the public interest. Where I feel a little bit cautious is paying attention to the statement from the Conservation Commission, which Sarah's already referred to, but I think the lack of town infrastructure is a concern at this point. The wastewater would be 180 units, so because it's the 2 apartment buildings and the 90 units. And some expressed concern about whether or not there would be groundwater or wetlands issues there. Now, maybe that's not for us to decide. I just wanted to raise that question. And Dave Ford's cautionary note about his dream of the septic system is something that would need to go through the town, as you pointed out. And so this stuff is all kind of preliminary, and so it seems to me, well, cautionary notes, it may well be that these things will be resolved as they go through the next boards. So I'm just wondering what the potential consequences of our vote would be. Will that determine, other processes?
The consequences of?
If we vote to approve, the question is, what are the consequences of our approval?
So we can't say totally, but there will be a list of conditions, and we haven't yet started that list, but obviously, DES and approval by the town for the septic systems or that has to be done, and that will be part of the conditions should we approve, as well as probably some others that we haven't gotten to yet.
The other thing is, although it was pointed out that the 2 apartment buildings have been approved already, if we approve this, that pretty much doubles the draw on these developments as far as water, drinking water, and sewer disposal septic system goes. Would it not?
Can I add something?
You want to ask her a question?
No, it's related to something that she said.
Okay.
She said about what are consequences. If we approve it, it's approved for that number of, pretty much for that number of units. Number of years ago, I think it was 2017, the ZBA approved a number of Alzheimer units over on 109 on the way down to the State Park. And in that case, neighbors were very concerned about lack of water. We were having kind of a drought back then, and we're sort of getting into that again. And they drilled a well, and DES determined that wasn't enough water because there's a large amount of water used in any type of a healthcare situation. They drilled a second one, and that wasn't enough. They drilled a third one, and it was determined by DES that that was drawing for the same amount of water that was one of the other two previously drilled wells, and they ended up, there's no unit there because it turned out that the property wouldn't sustain it. So for you just to be concerned about the additional, 90 on the top of the ones that are on the additional lot is not an idle concern.
Can I add to what Sarah said?
Do you want to add anything to, first, let's go back around instead of go back up.
You keep deferring, and I'm keeping track.
Sarah went out of order, so do you have
think
anything to say?
I think I understand what Kate was asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we approve 90 units and then it goes in front of the building department, and they turn around and say, you cannot meet this part of it, you can't meet this part of it, you can't meet this part of it, then it would stop and have to come back for a different variance.
Or they would build fewer units, whatever they could manage.
Jim, I couldn't hear you.
Is that what you meant by that, the effect?
I couldn't hear what he said.
You couldn't hear him?
No.
The short answer is if the variance is granted for 90 units, they are approved to build up to 90 units, not more than 90 units. But if there's an issue with water or septic or slope or DES or any other of the, 12,000 things they have yet to figure out, they may not be able to build the 90. It's not as though approving a density up to 90 means they have to build 90. Forget the environment, forget the slopes, everything else.
Yeah.
May I say something? But also Laura, the attorney, mentioned to us, and I don't know if it fits exactly this point, but that we can put conditions on things so that if it doesn't get approved, with this applicant, if it didn't work out, we can make sure another applicant doesn't come in following exactly what we approve now. Does that make sense? So
they can never
put
ask
constraints.
for never ask for the same variance more than once. I think that might be what you're referring to, because I don't remember that conversation.
What I believe she's referring to is a discussion where the board could make it very clear that the 90 units as submitted by the applicant with this representation and this plan on these two parcels does or does not meet the criteria. So it would not simply be a blanket, these parcels are forever approved for 90 units or disapproved for 90 units.
We can do something to make sure it stands just for this applicant.
Yes.
Well, no, the applicant.
No, it goes with the land.
Yeah. The applicant could sell this as soon as they get approvals.
You can make it go with the project as submitted, not the applicant themselves.
Okay.
And she also said when we met with her the other day, if they're asking for 90, that's all you can look at is 90. And is the 90 appropriate? And you have to weigh whether you think 90 is appropriate when 24 is allowed. 25,
Okay.
sorry.
Suzanne would like to catch up with the conversation.
Yes, as far as conditional approval, it's a process, as many years as I've been on this board, that we try to stay away from, we try to discourage. It becomes, in some cases, an administrative folly, and I wouldn't be in favor of it. But at any rate, Audrey, you spoke about the houses that you looked at in that short span. I would say to you that whereas the applicant used the 1 mile distance, that's what I used, and as you go further up, they're very nice situated homes and sparsely located. There's plenty of frontage in front of them, so they're not crowded. And as I said, there's 2 farms up there. It's Curtis Pike's farm, and then there's the one at the corner of Wambeck. So I think that this type of housing, not the type of prefab building, but if it was stick-built, I would say the same thing, and I want to make that clear, that it goes back to what I'm saying is in altering the essential character of locality, and a variance must be denied if the proposed use will alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And it's case law. And I feel that that is the case. I feel that the traffic impact will
Now, Suzanne, you've already gone through that. So you're responding to something I said, not reiterating the list
I'm
you already saw.
responding to something you said. I'm talking about the integrity and character of the neighborhood, and you were saying that one thing, and I'm saying another. And as far as very poorly drained, yes, it has been shown that there's no very poorly drained, but there sure is wetlands, and there's different classifications. There's plain old wetlands, and there's intermittent streams, for which we saw at the entrance of one of these driveways. And the Conservation Commission is weighed in, and they're concerned about wetlands, not primary, just primary wetlands. And as to the issue Sarah was talking about, another approval, that got approved, and that an approval stays with that property forever. The thing of it is, they couldn't get water, so they waited in excess of 2 years. That's the 2 years you have a vested interest to get your project done.
They got an extension.
Without an extension, and they came in for an extension. They didn't get it because they had no water. But there again, it was sort of an administrative debacle, and as one on this board, I don't want to go down that road.
Done?
For the moment.
Okay. So I guess the way I look at that situation that you two just spoke of, I think it worked exactly the way it's supposed to. I don't think it was a debacle. I think the zoning board looked at the 5 criteria, did whatever they did, and then all these other requirements that were supposed to be done, that played out, and it turned out that the property wasn't suitable for that. Now, to expect them to have drilled those wells prior to coming to the zoning board would not have been realistic. So to me, that sounds like a really good example of how it's supposed to work. I want to go back to what Sarah said. Sarah, I believe they only have 2 roads in. They have 3 frontages, but I believe they're only proposing to use 2 of them. Also, I want to mention the Conservation Commission concerns, and I think it's great to have them weighing in on things. What they're asking for is more stringent than what our ordinance requires. So in the long term, they're hoping that perhaps the town beefs up its zoning to be more stringent because of their views over a long piece of time with a lot of projects. It wouldn't even, I don't believe at all that we could say, well, the Conservation Commission would like 75 open space, so we're going to reject this based on their desires. That's not one of the things that we can do.
I don't believe they were trying to change zoning. I think they were just trying to weigh in with their concerns because
that's what
they
I
are
said.
the experts on conservation for the town.
And over time, the zoning may move more towards what they're saying. That's all I have to say on that. Kate, further? Yes.
Suzanne, a quick comment on traffic. You quoted roughly 900 trips per day would be added to the road traffic. 900 was the number. 5 trips a day times 90 units plus 90 apartments is 900 trips a day.
What did I do with it?
I think that's
That
low. When we were
averages-
looking at loops, it
It's-
was 10, the industry standard was 10 trips a day, not 5.
Are you asking me, I couldn't quite follow everything you said because I couldn't hear. Are you asking me where I got that information?
No, I want to point out that the 900 trips per day averages out, if you take a 12-hour day as a typical window.
That
we have
isn't
this-
how it was calculated.
I understand, but the 900 trips over a 12-hour day would amount to about one car, a little bit more than one car per minute.
That isn't,
So I think the highway could handle it.
I can't.
It's not
put
a
my-
very heavily trafficked road now.
I can't put my hands on it, but it's, the calculation is by units, not people.
No, I understand. All I'm pointing out is each trip, if you add up those trips per that calculation, you get 900 trips. That over a 12-hour day is about one trip a minute, one car per minute going down the road.
But Chuck, it's kind of.
I think Chuck is just making a point.
To do it that way because we all know that the traffic is when everybody goes to work in the morning, when everybody goes home.
Of course, and that's just an average. You know, people are going to go to work in the morning, and there's going to be, more traffic in the morning during the 7 to 8 or 9 o'clock hour when people go to work, for example. I understand. But on average, it's not heavily trafficked.
And let's hope those trips are taking place in the morning where people are going to work because we can't find anybody to do the jobs around here now.
I can only say that according to the Institute for Transportation Engineering Trip Generation Manual, version 6, says trips per day are by, in this case, 2 to 3 bedrooms, and it's per unit. And they say it's 5 trips per day per unit.
I'm not arguing that at all.
He's not arguing with your calculation.
I'm just saying, I'm not arguing with the way you got the number. I'm just saying that if you take your number and distribute those trips over 12 hours, it's a little more frequent than one car per minute, which is not a lot of traffic.
I would say if you want to go by the hour of the day, the majority will be in the morning when they're going to work, when they're driving down to Portsmouth or North Conway or what have you, or they're driving just over to the hospital or to the school.
Okay, it's 2 or 3 cars a minute or something else, but I don't think it's heavy traffic.
And they'll be driving back in the evening when they punch out from work.
Right.
And that will be right through our Pickering corner.
Or they're walking
Okay,
to
so
Hancock.
let's move on.
Or they're walking to Hancock Lumber, or they're walking to GSI Plastic.
I'm
and-
just throwing out what I have found for information. And
Right.
it comes from a document that's not mine.
We understand that.
Understood.
So number 3, the spirit of the ordinance is observed.
We did 1 and 2.
I know, I said number 3.
3?
I'm sorry, substantial justice is done. Would you like to start, Suzanne?
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
On substantial justice, 90 units, which will generate noise and traffic. I would like to point out that the state requires 400 feet of safe site distance in both directions, that the project will be seen. They have a lot of clearing to do. So the property owners benefits with 90 units versus the conservation ordinance of 24. Yet the harm to the residents and others in the area will be substantial and change to the rural existence. This request is not consistent with the surrounding area, and I know it's zoned residential, but when you drive through and around it, you can see that it's residential and rural and a couple of farms. So I think substantial justice doesn't qualify.
I'd like to go next.
Okay.
I'll take it right from the information that was supplied by the applicant. When you look at the third paragraph, the general public will also benefit by the provision of significant and needed residential owner-occupied housing, generous open space, available walking trails, and solar generation, all of which are consistent with the master plan and will be shielded from general public's view. In some, substantial justice will be done. But the biggest part on top of that is you go to these businesses around town and they're closed on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because they can't find any help. They're begging for people. And this is going to be hidden. I understand what Randy was saying about these other locations that are kind of pushed back in. My parents lived at Sugar Hill for 6 years. You can't see it from the road. I understand that completely. I go by the Birch Hill Estates. I live up on North 28. See it all the time. I didn't realize how big it was until I actually drove in there. Or Harriman Hill, the same thing. I was surprised how many houses were in there. That's all I have to say.
Okay, I'll fill in the space here. I think substantial justice has to be done when they're proposing the density of units that the residential area permits, except for this calculation by the conservation subdivision that is applied inappropriately to these to these lots, as far as I'm concerned. And we can go into that on another point, but the rest of the property all around here is no more dense than this project is proposing. So to say that they can't do it because it's, you know, it would not be substantial justice to deny it based on that. Sarah.
Not wanting to beat a dead horse here, but I was just looking, I thought I'd seen it somewhere. Kathy Barnard's notes from the TRC had talked about the traffic and the concern for a traffic light out by Beach Pond. And substantial justice means that the general public has to gain more than the loss to the individual. And, you know, they're coming in under the conservation subdivision, and that's what they have to live with. And I don't see that they're actually meeting that, and I don't see that they're having a loss. They can do, I can't remember how many different permutations we had from Mr. Barry for density, but it starts at 25, and we're supposed to have some flexibility here, but I think it's contortionist to go from 25 to 90.
And Kate?
I think substantial justice is done. I think Tim pretty much said what I think as well. I think there is a benefit to the general public.
Okay, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. Have we had any proof that they would be diminished?
I don't see any reason why it would be.
I have not seen any. And I don't believe that they would be.
Since they're surrounded by a lot of commercial property and businesses, it's not going to diminish their value.
Any other comments on that? Okay. Literal enforcement of provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. An unnecessary hardship is defined as owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. No fair and substantial relationships exist between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to this property. So I've already weighed in that I think this property has special conditions. I think it's different than the other dozen properties I saw that would fall that are burdened by the same ordinance. They're in the residential district, they're in the manufactured overlay district, and they have enough land to be required to have the conservation subdivision. These parcels are, 6 of them are out on North Main Street, behind the North Main Street primary properties, and beautiful wooded lots with great views, not much wetlands for the most part. They're absolutely beautiful lots that this conservation subdivision would make a lot of sense to protect by applying the conservation subdivision to those lots. And the same with the lots on Beach Pond Road. They're behind, they're large, there's a lot of value in the land that the conservation subdivision would be appropriate for. I don't see how applying the conservation subdivision density to a lot that, here's our 2 lots. The entire east side of the lot is the wastewater pond and spray fields, right? The entire west, sorry, that was the west side. The entire east side of the lot has bulk propane and oil storage tanks, an industrial factory that runs 24/7, the town stump dump, another industrial building, storage building, and to the very north, that small neighborhood that we talked about along the road and across the road and a little bit up the road and a little bit down the road that I already said is very similar to what's being proposed. So to apply to conservation subdivision to this parcel in this area just is not, it creates an unnecessary hardship. It's not necessary to apply that to this parcel because of the uniqueness of where it is. And that is the judgment, and that's the benchmark that you have to use for unnecessary hardship. Okay?
Okay. It has to be different from any others that surround it. It has to be uniquely different from its neighbors. Those parcels all around that you're pointing to and all around this, they're all subject to the same filtration plant and all of that. So
no, they're not.
Yes, they are. They take your map out, and they are in that same general area.
They don't require to have conservation subdivisions. They're not big enough.
The point is, no, you're missing the point. The point is what makes it unique that the other ones are not unique. And they all share that same uniqueness, so it's not unique. Let me just read
They don't share the conservation subdivision requirement. They're not big enough.
But that's not, I don't see that as the hardship difficulty. I don't,
This is the variance that's being asked for, is the density in the conservation subdivision.
right, but you're saying that it's unique because of where they're located, and I'm saying
Yes.
they all share that same location issue, which does not make them unique regarding the environment. But can I just read what
go
I
ahead.
wrote? Our conservation subdivision ordinance is a provision to require density compliance with calculations net density, section B, 175, 152, to place limitations on the integrity of the use to preserve the character of the area as well as open space. Our zoning does not interfere with the landowner's reasonable use of the property. There's no hardship as a result of unique setting of the property in this zone. Courts state that property be burdened by the zoning restriction in a manner that is a distinct difference from other similarly situated properties. That's what I was trying to say. Need not be the only one so burdened. The burden cannot result from zoning ordinance. Equal burden on all property owners in the district. This zoning ordinance has the same effect on this parcel as it does on every other parcel, similar parcels, in the size and soil suitability in the area. The variance goes with the land forever and could be used as justification for density increase in other areas in that zone in the future, which will create a cumulative effect. Let me see here. Let me just say, there are few variance requests that do not include skip that.
So one of the main differences, they're in different zones?
Can I finish?
You may.
I know it takes a minute, but I'm sorry if you have to wait. In conclusion, a hardship is not just an ordinary inconvenience or difficulty, and the owner must be able to show that there is an inability to make reasonable use of the land. The hardship or difficulty must be unique and should not generally apply to other properties. Hardship cannot be self-created, which even applies to action taken by previous owner. According to the courts, a hardship does not include a potential for economic loss or less than maximum return. Finally, the use of modification must not alter the essential character of the area. The ultimate question that must be asked is the property owner deprived of rights or deprived of a desire? That's my comment.
Okay, Sarah?
I really looked at this hardship thing, mostly because our town attorney said to look at it. And 175, 149 zoning districts, where it's permitted, it says a conservation subdivision option shall be required in all residential districts when the parcel size noted below has been met. Parcel size triggering required open space, 10 acres. So anything that's over 10 acres over in that neighborhood would be burdened similarly with a conservation subdivision. And a special condition that usually occurs is something that is inherent in the property that prevents you from doing something. For example, an easy one would be like a setback for your building. And it turns out that your lot is all ledge, except for right up at the front of it next to the street. And so in order to get your septic system and everything in there, and maybe you need to get relief from that setback. But it's something inherent in the land, and there's nothing on that lot that prevents you from putting 1 per acre, 45 units. So I don't see that they have a special condition. And by the way, the stump dump was taken out of use by DES. I think it was in the 1980s.
Kate?
I'm not sure that I see what the hardship is, but I also, it seems to me that the conservation subdivision provides for the flexibility, so kind of a 1 per acre doesn't look as if that's anything that's enforceable. I don't see a problem here.
Nor do I.
Second
I'm not sure if I
time
understood
around.
what you said. You think conservation easement is preventing it from doing 1 per acre? Is that what
Beg your pardon? Well, the flexibility in terms of the lot size allows more than 1 per acre, does it not? It's my understanding.
But we're looking at a special condition that would hinder it from being able to do that, 1 per acre.
And
That's what the variance is for.
This board has the right to grant that variance to go to 90 if we so choose.
Or not.
Or not. I'm an optimist.
You want to go around again? On rebuttal? Oh, yep. Tim, rebuttal to anything? Or
No, I'm
add?
clear. Whole case is clear.
I want to say that I am really close to saying that not only is number one of the hardship variance met, but I have a really hard time envisioning a housing development on these lots in this area with a house on an acre or a house on a half an acre, as is permitted in the residential zone after the first one, that could be affordable, that people would want to live here. We're talking about, look at Wolfeboro Commons. They're a clustered development. They're going for $300,000 and $400,000 a house. The road at the end of Sewell Road, is it Knoll Road? That's a cluster development. They're within 20 feet of each other. I'm sure they're up in that price too. I don't think that this can be developed with regular stick frame houses spread apart on this lot. Not that they would be allowed to, because it's a conservation subdivision. With the way the zoning is applied to this lot, I actually don't think that it would be possible.
So are you insinuating that these will be going for less than $300,000 and that the people that work at Dunkin' Donuts at $13 an hour can afford them?
Yes, I think they'll be less than $300,000.
I guess I have to disagree with that.
Well, I mean, I think it is less than 300, because when we looked at the price of the manufactured housing, from what I'm remembering, wasn't the high end like 160-ish or so? And so if you say that the housing is 160-ish and what they're paying then is rent for the land, rent for,
Mortgage.
well, mortgage, right. But I think that's doable, and I don't think everybody's at a minimum wage income there. I mean, we're talking about some profession. We're talking about a place that has virtually no housing right now. So it can be for a fireman, it can be for a teacher. I mean, I think...
Only if the local economy supports that.
Well, our local economy is going to
that.
crash if we don't get some people living here to work here. I mean, it all just, what comes first? But no matter what, I do think it's less than 300,000. I do think that they shared that number with us.
Yeah, that's the number they used.
And one other thing that it's accomplishing is not only, I think they've shown that they meet the 5 criteria, but one of the biggest hardships also is to the town. The town has the hardship of not enough people.
I wish that was part of it, but it's not.
I'd like to address Kate's comment.
Okay.
Kate, you... What? Kate, did you say? Kate. Kate's comment. You had concern that about the lot size. The question before us is 90 units density. I'm trying to think of an adjective. Suitable, balances well with the ordinance, which talks about allowing 24, 25, or even a second alternative, I think it was 35. So that's the size of the lot. We finally ironed out the fact that they have to put them on lots and not sites.
We have not heard that variance yet. We are simply hearing the density variance.
Oh, okay, well then she brought up the size of the lot, and that's what I'm addressing. The size of the lot is not under our purview, it's the density on the parcel.
So what I heard her say, and maybe I misunderstood or maybe you did, was that in the residential zone, they can have one dwelling per acre and then a half acre for each dwelling after that. That's the allowed density. Not saying how big the lot is, just the plain density, if you don't go to the conservation subdivision.
Yeah, but that's a big if, isn't it?
Well,
That
that's what the
because-
variance is for.
Because you can't not do the conservation subdivision. So
Why-
we're right back.
Why can you not do it? That's what the variance is for.
Because if you, well, the variant, but because if you have a lot size in that chart that falls within conservation subdivision, that's what you have to do.
That's why they're asking for a variance.
I understand that,
Oh.
but the thing of it is this 90 units flies in the face of what the conservation subdivision says is allowed by their formulation.
I still come back to that's why they're asking for a variance.
Well, I know that.
Okay.
I don't understand what that has to do with anything. That's what they're here for, but I'm
Right.
saying 90 units is what we're talking about, is 90 units. The number that they're using, is that justifiable against the conservation subdivision, which is more restrictive? Do we want to vary it that much to allow 90 versus 24? And we don't get a choice. The choice is either yes or no, they get 90 or they don't. So
So are we
I'm making the
anywhere-
argument that 90 is too much.
I understand your argument. So are we at a place where we might make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to deny case 11V22. It does not meet the 5 criteria for 90 units.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of the denial? Speak.
No.
No. Sue? Stan? You have to
No,
vote.
we voted yes.
No, you
Want to do a
motioned.
roll call, Beth? A motion to deny.
She's doing
Yeah.
a roll call vote.
I'm doing a roll call vote.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
I'm in favor because flexible is flexible, but 25 to 90 is out of the question.
So that's a yes. So 2 noes, 2 yeses.
No.
So no, does not pass. Can I have another motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the, hold on. Case 11-V-22, that the applicant has met the criteria for the 5 items and that we should approve this project.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
Yes.
Yes.
No?
No?
Yes.
Motion passes. We do have 2 other variances to
Wait a minute.
Here.
Please,
Yep,
we're not done with this. There needs to be some conditions put on
there
this.
does. But,
And this is the time to do it. While we're still under deliberations.
You can glare all you'd like, but adding conditions after a motion is not usually what happens. Usually if you want to add conditions, they get added as part of the motion. So it would be a motion to approve 11V22 as submitted with the following conditions, second, then vote. So you just may want to rethink.
So they don't even have the condition to file it or anything?
well, you know, I think all the conditions that we have talked about are requirements from other places, so I'm not really concerned. However, we do have 2 other variances to hear, and if we want to tag conditions onto those, then it would all be the same thing. Assuming, of course, that, you know, those pass muster and don't sink this approval.
I also think a lot of those conditions are going to be addressed at the planning board and the building department.
That's what I said.
I agree with you.
Well, you know, this is really great that we jumped on the motion, didn't take time to allow for an amendments for conditions for which you said previously, if it was approved, we needed to put some conditions on it. So here we go. We've left it open checkbook. At any rate, it's done, so move on.
Can we hear the next variance?
Where are we going next? Are we going with 5?
No, one of the other 2.
Are we going to go with 7?
It doesn't matter to me.
Bear with me 1 minute while I find it.
I think one makes more sense than the other, but I'm not sure which one is which at the moment.
No, there's another.
Where is?
I'm looking for my original document.
Okay, so.
Okay, did you want me to read the case?
Well, number 7 is more than one dwelling unit per lot in the R zone, and number 8 is more than one dwelling per lot, separate ownership requirement in the manufactured housing overlay district. It seems like if we heard that one, it might answer the other question, possibly, although we do have to hear them both.
So if we're on case 7, basically, as you can see from my letter, I don't think that we need to go forward with case 7 because the conservation subdivision section 175-150 says that where the specific development requirements are addressed in this article, the conservation subdivision article, they shall supersede any other town regulation. And if you go to 175-151B entitled ownership, it says that the tract or land may be held in single and separate ownership or in multiple ownerships. And if that's the case, then I don't believe we need to go forward on that. You can have a park owner rent out 90 sites. And again, the only reason we filed it is because it was determined when we were all probably a little less sophisticated that this was required. But as I stand here today, I don't believe that that variance needs to go forward. The only thing that we're looking for is that the board concurs, much like it did last time, that 175-151B entitled ownership says you don't need to go forward. And that was in my letter. I presume you've looked at it. If you haven't, I can.
If it's instructive to the board at all, based on everything we've learned since this began, that is the decision that the code enforcement officer would make, is that the variance is not required based on the wording of conservation subdivision.
I thought the attorney said clearly the other day that we had to make an official decision, either have the applicant withdraw it, yay or nay, or make the decision that it wasn't needed. We can't just let it lay out there.
Correct. I wasn't suggesting you just leave it lay out there. What I was telling the board is what we've learned is that if the applicant were to proceed with 90 units on 90 individual lots, the planning board has the flexibility to address lot size.
Correct.
All said lots can be in common ownership or individually owned, as discussed through the planning board. So I was not suggesting, again, that just be let lay out there. I was suggesting that if it were presented anew, code enforcement would not be issuing the same denial that led to the variance request, in case that would be helpful to the board making a determination that the variance threshold had not been met.
So I totally understand what you say, but if we look at the language of the ordinance, I think there's one big difference in the language, and that is in the language that talks about separate ownership and one lot, it says may, as opposed to, and you make this point in your letter, the lot size says shall. So there's a difference there. We may, that could be who knows what reason why it comes forward and can be on, a double lot or, there's different reasons. A campground could come forward, for instance. And they're already allowed to have sites, so maybe you don't need lots. But the may, I don't think, is as stringent as the shall. The fact that they're different makes me think we have to hear those other two.
Well, you can go either way. That's how I read the may. You can evidence single ownership or not, regardless of lot size. It's strictly ownership. And again, as Tavis pointed out, if we'd submitted this application today, we wouldn't have been denied on that point in the first instance. So we really shouldn't be here at all.
Well, on the other hand, the board may have thought that that was an incorrect denial. So I want to ask you, from the project's standpoint, what's the hardship of having separate lots that you own? Separate lots that they own them all.
So that's not, see, I don't think that we even get to this board. Again, if we had filed this application, it would have been granted on that, and we would never come before this board. So this is a fallacious variance request. We thought it was legitimate at the time because it was denied. But if we submitted this today, we wouldn't even be here.
Well,
However, it was denied, so we have to decide
remember,
what to do.
it was denied because there are multiple residential units on the parcel. It wasn't clarified until all of this discussion came up that sites, lots, parcels, if you look at the definition of lot, you end up at a different place than you do under the definition of subdivision that includes lots, sites, et cetera.
Correct. However, the reading and advice that we have, and I think is correct, is that the conservation subdivision prevails when it speaks directly to something, and it speaks directly to lot sizes. It only speaks generally about the other things, and the definition of subdivision is only a general definition. It's not specific enough to override the conservation subdivision requirements.
Goes, but the conservation subdivision rules supersede.
When they're spoken to.
When they're spoken to, and it's the only part of the ordinance that says about ownership. And it's all we're talking about is ownership. Can one owner own 90 lots or 90 sites, or does it have to be 90 separate? And it says you can go either way. You may do this, or you may do this. Therefore, we shouldn't even be here.
I don't know about,
Well, I mean,
But I don't want to get.
we as a board can take a vote on whether that denial is correct or not, and we can dismiss the case if we don't feel it is, or we can hear the variance. So we have a couple of options here.
wait a minute, you explain that again?
Right. If we believe what the attorney is saying, that the conservation subdivision language supersedes the language of the denials, we can say that we can dismiss that variance because we're not going to hear it because it's not hearable.
Okay, and as I understand it, if there's a conflict between two regulations, the stricter one takes precedent.
Except for if the conservation subdivision speaks to it, that takes
That
precedence.
takes precedent. Yeah, well,
So the argument is, does it speak to it? And
and we're
there's
talking
some,
about lots.
we're talking about both lots and ownership. I mean, they're two different variances.
And the town attorney, our attorney said that we have the right to vary that and approve it as sites if we
Her
wanted to.
opinion was they were separate, but, you know, the board can decide whatever it is.
So the options are one large parcel, all owned by one person, and then the manufactured housing on that, or then separated into lots, still owned by one person. But isn't option 3 still individual lots that are owned by the same person that owns the?
They're not applying for that.
Okay.
Well, we don't know what they're applying for because they haven't actually applied for a
Well,
conservation
it's none of our
subdivision.
business, whether they own it or whether they sell them.
But conceivably, they could take 45, 46 acres and divide it into 91 lots.
And if we're going to argue the variance, I would say that is not good for the town, because it would be impossible for those people all to be doing the same thing at the same time, and enforcement would be impossible unless
Okay.
they have an organization,
So there are 2 options then.
really.
Two options as?
Hear the variance, dismiss the variance,
Or could they withdraw
or what?
could they withdraw the request for variance?
I don't believe they can, because that would still be hanging over their head. We need to dismiss it
Okay.
for them.
I would
if that's
move
the
that we
way.
dismiss the variance.
7? Is that what we were speaking to?
So we have 2. One is ownership and one is separate lots.
You could
Suzanne, can you
motion-
say
Move
why?
that we dismiss the 2 lots, 2 variances. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Number 7 and number 8. Is there
Number
a
7 and 8.
Case,
Just so that I understand, could you say why? What the ration? No? Okay.
Is there a second?
I didn't hear the,
She made a motion to dismiss case 7 and 8.
Because it didn't meet the threshold for the variance.
before we do that,
Could I just ask, what is the reason?
For dismissing them?
Yeah, because we don't need to go forward on it.
Because because there's been a denial that hasn't been retracted, so there's still a denial out there. I don't know how else we would close that.
I just want to be clear that we don't want to come back. You don't want us to come back.
Right, so the denial, we would.
The motion
I mean, our
was,
plan is to go to the planning board next.
the motion was to dismiss 7 and 8V22. I think the unheard words were because they didn't meet the threshold for requiring a variance because the ordinance allows it
That would be
otherwise.
fine.
Was there a second?
Second.
We're making an attempt to take care of the official document he has over there that brought you here.
Right. But it's because it's not required.
Doesn't meet the
Right,
threshold.
which is perfectly fine.
Tim?
That's what we prefer.
Vote?
Yes.
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 All done.
And then the last one,
What about 5?
Those are both, we did those both. Oh, the last one.
number 5, which is the merger. And for the same reason,
Well, issuance of a building permit on a lot with no frontage, but the board has treated them both as the same project, so you realistically could withdraw it because you plan to
You
merge
could-
them.
Right.
I prefer you to dismiss because we didn't need it. I don't really want to withdraw.
I did originally, but then I recognized that if you wanted it heard, we could hear it.
We don't want it heard because,
So
again, we don't
withdraw it.
believe
Yeah.
that we're here rightfully on that because of the definition, which again, we've all stumbled into after it, that now says we don't need to go forward on that because the definition of lot says you can have 2 or more contiguous ones, and we're going to merge them anyway at the planning board. And we've said that all along.
That's a condition of your application because it's on your plan that you've given us. So that's what it's a condition.
And if that's the understanding, then we will be happy
Withdraw.
to withdraw that one.
Oh, yeah, he's withdrawing.
Thank you all for your service.
Do we need to dismiss that one also?
No, he withdrew it.
No, he withdrew.
I move to close the public hearing, and I move to adjourn.
When he wants to withdraw it, don't we have to accept his withdrawal?
No,
I don't think so.
No, that's their purview.
Okay.
I made a motion
it-
to close the public hearing and adjourn.
Can we do one at a time? Close the public hearing, second?
Second.
Okay.
Everybody in favor? Aye. We have
A half a
no
year's of-
agenda, we have nothing else
We have a
tonight.
half a year of notes.
Huh?
We have a half a year of,
We have a lot of minutes.
Well, the agenda that was sent to everyone had the discussion topic of discussion of
You
submitting.
know, I didn't get, I either didn't see it attached,
I sent the link to the minutes and the link to the agenda.
okay.
But it was,
Motion to adjourn is non-debatable.
Second,
All in
everyone in
favor?
favor?
aye.
Aye. We'll have to address that next time.
I thought we had decided,
So we're out of session.
I know, I'm talking to you. I thought.